Her ID was expired. Her bag held military-grade gear she shouldn't have. To the young guards, she was a liability. They had no idea they were manhandling the very legend who wrote the security protocols protecting their base. The sun beat down on the asphalt of Northwell Base's main checkpoint, a merciless, high-noon hammer. The air shimmered in waves over the concrete barriers, thick with the smells of hot tar, dust, and the faint, clean scent of pine from the surrounding Georgia woods. It was a place of stark lines and sharper authority, designed to project absolute control. Every sound was amplified in the oppressive stillness, the snap of a flag in the wind, the crunch of boots on gravel, the low hum of the barrier's hydraulic system. Into this rigid world walked a ghost. She was a woman of 40, her face a map of experiences she never spoke of, framed by straight, brown hair pulled back without ceremony. She wore faded canvas work pants and a plain, gray t-shirt, clothes that made her blend into any background. Her name, according to the laminated contractor's pass she presented, was Evelyn Shaw. Private Danner, barely out of his teens and sweating in his crisp uniform, took the pass. He scanned it, and a flicker of uncertainty crossed his face. He leaned over to his superior, Sergeant Kells, a man whose smug confidence was as starched as his collar. "Sergeant," Danner whispered, a little too loudly. "This pass is 2 weeks expired." Sergeant Kells sighed, the sound of a man burdened by the incompetence of the civilian world. He strolled over, his posture a declaration of power. He took the pass from Danner, glanced at it, then fixed his eyes on Evelyn. "Ma'am," he said, the title a courtesy stripped of all respect. "This pass is invalid. Base regulations require a full search of your person and property. Open the bag." Evelyn's expression didn't change. There was no flash of anger, no plea of innocence. There was only a profound, unsettling stillness. She looked at Kells with pale blue eyes that seemed to see straight through the uniform, the rank, and the man wearing them. Without a word, she swung the dusty olive backpack from her shoulder and placed it on the hot metal inspection table. She unzipped it. The contents that spilled out were a contradiction. First came a compact, high-precision soldering iron, its tip immaculate. Next, a digital optic calibrator, nestled in a custom-fit foam case. Then, a heavy, leather-bound logbook, its pages filled with dense, handwritten equations and schematics that looked more like a physicist's diary than a contractor's notes. Kells's suspicion sharpened into outright hostility. He picked up a small, heavy tool with a complex lens array. "This is military grade, ma'am. Where did a civilian contractor get equipment like this?" Evelyn remained silent, her patience an invisible shield. She had endured interrogations in languages she didn't speak, in rooms without light, by men far more dangerous than this puffed-up checkpoint sergeant. His bluster was like background noise. "I asked you a question," Kells snapped, his voice rising. He began searching more aggressively, his movements jerky and unprofessional. He saw her silence not as strength, but as guilt. "You're not cleared for any of this." He grabbed the backpack and, in a fit of frustration, turned it upside down and shook it violently. A few loose screws, a roll of electrical tape, and a protein bar clattered onto the table. Then, he tore at the bag's inner lining, a ripping sound that violated the day's oppressive quiet. From the shredded compartment, something small and fabric fluttered down. It landed silently on the metal table, face up. It was a patch, crudely sewn, its threads of faded gray on a black background. It depicted the silhouette of a wolf, its form seeming to dissolve into a thick, swirling fog. The Ghost Recon insignia. Danner stared at it, confused. He'd only heard rumors of that unit, bedtime stories for new recruits. Kells frowned, recognizing the symbol but unable to place its significance. To them, it was just another piece of contraband, another mark against this strange, silent woman. Evelyn's gaze finally shifted. She looked at the patch, a flicker of something unreadable in her eyes. It was a ghost from another life, a life the world had been told was over. And in that moment, she knew her quiet existence had just come to an end. Colonel Mark Ramsey was having a bad day. The base's new MQ-9 Reaper drones, the pride of his command, were acting up. For weeks, they'd been experiencing inexplicable signal drops and GPS anomalies during routine training exercises, glitches that defied every diagnostic his top technicians ran. He was walking from the command center to the motor pool, his mind churning through budget reports and the grating possibility of a systemic flaw in his $50 million drone program, when a flicker of movement at the main checkpoint snagged his attention. He saw Kells, one of his more arrogant NCOs, manhandling a civilian woman. He saw a dusty backpack turned inside out. It was a routine security stop, something he wouldn't normally notice. But then he saw it. Lying on the gleaming metal of the inspection table, stark against the clutter of tools, was the patch. The wolf fading into fog. Time stopped. The oppressive heat, the distant hum of the base, the tightness in his own chest from the day's stress, it all vanished. In its place was the bone-rattling chill of a Kandahar night 13 years ago. Flash. The acrid smell of cordite. The metallic taste of fear. The desperate sound of his men's ragged breathing over the comms, pinned down by an enemy they couldn't see. They were out of ammo, out of time, and out of hope. The official record would have called it a catastrophic loss. Flash. A new voice on the encrypted net. A woman's voice. Incredibly calm. Vantage 1, this is Shadow 9. I have a solution. Stand by for fire mission redirect. It wasn't a voice from their chain of command. It was a ghost. Ramsey's blood ran cold. He felt the phantom sting of shrapnel in his left shoulder, a wound he'd gotten just moments before that voice had saved 47 lives, including his own. He was just a captain then, but he'd never forgotten. You don't forget the voice of the angel who walks through hell to pull you out. He started walking. His polished boots, which had been striding with purpose, now moved with a slow, deliberate gravity. Each step was heavy with memory. Private Danner saw him approaching and snapped to a clumsy version of attention. Sergeant Kells, still posturing over the table, turned with a self-satisfied smirk, expecting a commendation for his vigilance. The smirk evaporated when he saw the colonel's face. It was a mask of pale, deadly seriousness. Ramsey's eyes weren't on the guards. They were locked on the patch, then lifted to the woman. He studied her face, seeing past the 40 years to the ghost in the machine he remembered. He reached the table and stopped. The air crackled with a tension so thick it felt like a physical force. Danner was trembling. Kells was frozen, his bravado finally shattered by a presence far more intimidating than his own. Ramsey leaned in, not toward his men, but toward Evelyn. His voice was a low whisper, barely audible, yet it carried the absolute weight of his rank and a history the guards couldn't possibly comprehend. Stand down, he commanded, his eyes still fixed on Evelyn. Then, his gaze shifted to Kells, and the whisper turned to ice. Do not touch anything else. He paused, letting the order sink into their terrified minds before delivering the final, devastating blow to their reality. That's a ghost. He straightened up and gestured for Evelyn to follow him. Come with me, ma'am. She gave a single, almost imperceptible nod, gathered her logbook, and fell into step beside him. They walked away, a 4-star colonel and a woman in dusty work clothes, leaving 2 stunned guards standing over a forbidden piece of history, their small world irrevocably broken. The inside of Colonel Ramsey's office was another world. The air was cool and smelled of clean filters and old leather. The chaos of the checkpoint was replaced by a heavy, soundproofed silence. Ramsey shut the door, the click of the lock sealing them in. He walked to his desk but didn't sit. He faced Evelyn, the formal barrier of his rank dissolving into the raw respect of a soldier facing a legend. Kandahar. 2012, Ramsey said, his voice quiet but intense. The 101st Airborne, 2nd Battalion. We were caught in a 3-sided ambush in the Argundab River Valley. We were blind. Our comms were jammed, our drones were useless. They were walking mortars in on us. We were counting our last rounds. Evelyn stood motionless, her expression unreadable. She didn't confirm or deny. She just waited. Then a voice came on the net. Ramsey continued, his eyes locked on hers, searching. Call sign Shadow 9. She said she'd found a back door in the enemy's jamming frequency. 30 seconds later, our drones came back online, feeding us perfect targeting data. An airstrike obliterated the ambush. The official after-action report called it a fortuitous atmospheric event. No mention of Ghost Recon. No mention of Shadow 9. He paused. They listed your entire unit as Kia a week later. A training accident. That's what the official records say, Evelyn replied, her voice even, betraying no emotion. It was the first time she had spoken to him. Records can be incomplete. A tense silence filled the room. It was a confirmation wrapped in the careful language of someone who had lived outside the system for over a decade. Ramsey finally broke the silence, his tone shifting from reverence to urgency. For 3 months, this base has been plagued by drone interference. Signal hijacks, GPS spoofing. My best techs are chasing their tails. They say it's sophisticated jamming, maybe from a foreign power. But it's not, is it? Evelyn walked to the large whiteboard on his wall. She picked up a black marker. Your techs are looking for a sledgehammer trying to break down a door, she said, her voice cutting through the silence. She began to draw a complex flow chart of a drone's command and control system. Her hand was steady, the lines she drew precise and confident. But this isn't a sledgehammer. This is a key. Someone is using a deprecated command protocol, a ghost code I designed 15 years ago as a failsafe. It's a keyhole nobody is supposed to remember exists. Ramsey stared at the diagram. It was more detailed than anything his own multi-million-dollar tech division had produced. They're using your own methods against you. They're using Ghost Recon methods, she corrected softly. It's how we were trained to think. Exploit the unseen, the forgotten. Ramsey felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. The implications were staggering. He turned to his secure terminal. I need to verify something. His fingers flew across the keyboard, entering a series of authorization codes that went far beyond standard clearance. He was accessing the military's deep archives, the digital graveyard of secrets and lies. He typed in a query, Unit, Ghost Recon. Personnel. Call sign, Shadow 9. The screen flashed red. Access denied. File classified, Eternity, do not open. Ramsey overrode it with a command code reserved for battlefield emergencies. The screen flickered, and a heavily redacted file appeared. Most of it was just black lines. But there was one attachment, a scanned image of a handwritten page from a technical journal, detailing the very counter-jamming protocols they were still using today. I need a tech to verify this handwriting, Ramsey barked into his desk comm, against the logbook from the checkpoint. Now. Minutes later, a nervous-looking tech officer entered, holding Evelyn's logbook as if it were a holy relic. He scanned the page from her book and compared it to the image on the screen. His eyes went wide. Sir, the tech stammered, his voice filled with awe. The handwriting, the notation style, the formulaic structure, it's a perfect match. Sir, this is her. This is Shadow 9. Ramsey dismissed the tech and looked at Evelyn. The last shred of doubt vanished, replaced by the terrifying certainty of the situation. The ghost from the archives was standing in his office. And she had just told him that another ghost was out there, hunting his base. Ramsey gave Evelyn a temporary workspace in the drone command center, a cavernous, climate-controlled room humming with the sound of servers and quiet tension. He assigned her his top technical team, led by Lieutenant Marcus Graham, a brilliant but cocksure young officer who saw the world in binary code and believed any problem could be solved with enough processing power. Graham watched as Evelyn set up her station. She didn't requisition a top-of-the-line terminal. Instead, she unrolled her worn leather toolkit and pulled out an analog oscilloscope that looked like it belonged in a museum. She bypassed the main network interface, instead clamping leads directly onto the physical hardware of the central command server. "With all due respect, Colonel," Graham murmured to Ramsey, just out of Evelyn's earshot. "Are we sure about this? Her methods are antiquated. We have quantum encryption analyzers that can run 1 trillion simulations a second. She's using gear my grandfather would have called old." Ramsey just gave him a hard look. "Lieutenant, for 3 weeks your trillion simulation analyzers have found nothing. Give her whatever she needs. And stay out of her way." Graham complied, but his skepticism was a palpable force in the room. He and his team stood by, watching with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity, as this woman from the past went to work. Evelyn was oblivious to their judgment. She was in her element. The drone command center faded away, replaced by the pure, elegant logic of systems and signals. Her fingers moved with an economy of motion, adjusting dials on the oscilloscope. She wasn't looking for a massive, disruptive signal. She was listening for a whisper in the noise, a ghost in the machine. Her eyes were fixed on the green line dancing across the small screen, a language only she could fully understand. For hours, she worked in silence. She had them run specific diagnostic routines, not the standard ones, but obscure subroutines she recalled from the system's primordial code. The younger techs would execute the commands, watch them come back clean on their advanced digital readouts, and shrug. "Nothing, ma'am," Graham reported after the 5th such test, a hint of "I told you so" in his tone. "All channels are secure. No unauthorized pings." Evelyn didn't look up from her oscilloscope. "Run diagnostic 7B again," she said. But this time, shunt the primary data stream through the auxiliary coolant sensor's power regulator. Graham frowned. The command made no logical sense. It was like trying to start a car by turning on the windshield wipers. "Ma'am, that sensor's regulator is on an isolated circuit. It has no connection to the data stream." "Just do it, Lieutenant," Ramsey's voice cut in over the comm, a clear warning. Sighing, Graham typed in the absurd command. On his screen, nothing happened. But on Evelyn's small oscilloscope, the serene green line convulsed. A tiny, almost imperceptible parasitic wave appeared, a tremor on the surface of the main signal. It was there for less than a second, a digital heartbeat. Graham's jaw went slack. He stared from his blank, billion-dollar monitor to her ancient, $20 device. What was that?" "That," Evelyn said, her voice still perfectly calm, "is the keyhole. It's a data echo, created by a feedback loop in the power regulator. It's too small for your digital filters to even register as an anomaly. But it's there. And it's a perfectly timed pulse." She finally looked up at him. "It's not a jammer, Lieutenant. It's a conductor's baton. And it's been telling your drones exactly when to dance." In that moment, the entire room went silent. The sound of servers seemed to fade. Graham and his team stared at Evelyn Shaw, no longer seeing a relic from the past, but a master architect who knew every secret bolt and hidden wire in the cathedral they had only just learned to pray in. He felt a profound sense of humility, the kind that only comes from witnessing true, undeniable genius. He whispered to the tech next to him, his voice filled with a new, profound respect. "My God. She didn't just read the manual. She wrote the whole damn library." It wasn't a whisper this time, it was a roar. Alarms blared through the command center, a cacophony of electronic shrieks. On the main tactical display, the icons for 3 MQ-9 Reapers, airborne on a critical surveillance training mission, turned from steady green to flashing red. "We've lost GPS lock on drones 1, 4, and 7, a technician shouted, his voice tight with panic. "They're flying blind," another yelled. "Flight paths are becoming erratic." Collision course projected in 90 seconds. Lieutenant Graham was at the main console, his face pale, sweat beading on his forehead. He typed frantically, trying to re-establish manual control, but the system wasn't responding. They're locked out. The hijacker has total control. Colonel Ramsey stood behind him, his face grim. What's their payload? Full surveillance package and 2 inert Hellfire missiles on each bird for weight simulation, Graham answered, not looking away from the screen. If they go down over the civilian sector east of the base. God help us. That's $50 million in hardware, Colonel, and a PR nightmare we'll never recover from. The room was descending into controlled chaos. Men and women with years of training were shouting conflicting information, their state-of-the-art systems rendered useless. In the middle of the storm, Evelyn Shaw was an island of absolute calm. She hadn't moved from her small, analog station. While everyone else was looking at the big screens showing the disaster, she was watching the tiny green line on her oscilloscope. She saw the parasitic signal, no longer a subtle pulse but a raging, constant wave. The conductor was leading a symphony of destruction. Lieutenant Graham, Evelyn's voice cut through the noise, clear and sharp as breaking glass. It wasn't a suggestion, it was a command. Cease all attempts to re-establish primary control. What? Ma'am, we have to. You are fighting their fire with gasoline, she interrupted, her tone unyielding. Cut power to the main satellite uplink. Now. It was an insane order. It was their only link to the drones. Graham hesitated, looking to Ramsey. The colonel simply nodded. Do it. With a trembling hand, Graham slammed a red-covered button. The main tactical display went black. A collective gasp went through the room. They were now truly blind. Now, Evelyn said, her eyes still on her screen, reroute auxiliary power from substation 3 to the primary comms server. Not through the network. A direct physical bypass. A tech scrambled to obey, physically patching cables in a server rack. What you've just done, Evelyn explained to the silent, terrified room, is cut off their access point. But the drones are still following their last malicious command. They're still going to crash. She paused, her fingers making a final, minute adjustment on a small dial. Unless, they were built with a failsafe. A ghost protocol. On her oscilloscope, she saw a new signal emerge, one she had just authorized. A clean, steady pulse. Her pulse. Colonel, she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly. Bring the tactical display back online. Graham restored the feed. For a heart-stopping second, the screen was still red. Then, one by one, the icons for drones 1, 4, and 7 flickered from red back to a steady, solid green. Their erratic flight paths smoothed out into perfect, stable holding patterns. A wave of relieved, breathless cheers erupted through the command center. That evening, Ramsey called a full security briefing with all senior base officers. The room was packed. He stood at the podium and recounted the day's events. For 3 days, we believed we were fighting a technical failure, he began, his voice ringing with authority. We were not. We were under a deliberate, sophisticated attack designed to exploit the very foundations of our systems. He gestured to the back of the room, where Evelyn stood quietly in the shadows. The woman who stopped that attack, who saved this base millions of dollars and an immeasurable loss of face, is Evelyn Shaw. A major in the front row stood up. Sir, with all due respect, her credentials. Her credentials, Ramsey cut him off, his voice like steel, were written in the blood and fire of the Kandahar Valley. Because I was there when her unit, Ghost Recon, saved my entire battalion from annihilation. I am standing here today because of her. The room fell into a stunned, absolute silence. Shadow 9 didn't just design our security systems, Ramsey said, his voice thick with emotion. She risked her life under enemy fire to keep them operational while her team provided cover for our evacuation. He turned to face Evelyn, and in front of the entire command staff, Colonel Mark Ramsey snapped to attention and rendered a sharp, perfect salute. "Ma'am. It's an honor to finally thank you properly." Evelyn met his gaze, her expression serious. Her quiet response dropped into the silent room like a grenade. "Colonel, I didn't come back for thanks," she said. "I came back because I recognized the signature. The person doing this isn't a foreign power. It's someone from my unit. It's another ghost." The revelation sent a shockwave through the command staff. A rogue Ghost Recon operative was a threat no one had ever conceived, a phantom enemy who knew all their secrets because he had helped write them. In the days that followed, Colonel Ramsey made Evelyn a formal offer. Full reinstatement. Any rank you want. A permanent consultant position with top-tier clearance. Name your price. We need you. They were in his office again. Evelyn looked out the window at the base, at the soldiers walking the neat pathways, at the flag flying crisply in the afternoon sun. "Ghosts don't wear uniforms, Colonel," she said, turning back to him. "We lose our effectiveness when we're seen. I'll help you hunt him. But on my terms." "Which are?" Ramsey asked. "I work alone. I have access to any system I need, no questions asked. And my name stays out of every official database. When this is over, I disappear again. Some ghosts are better left that way." Ramsey agreed without hesitation. Evelyn's presence on the base became a quiet legend. She came and went in her civilian clothes, a silent figure moving through the high-security corridors. The tech team, once led by a skeptical Lieutenant Graham, now referred to her simply as Miss Shaw, their tone bordering on reverence. They would part ways for her in the hallways, watching her with a respect they didn't even afford to some generals. One afternoon, as she was leaving the base, Private Danner was on duty at the checkpoint. He saw her approaching and stepped out of the guard booth, his posture stiff and nervous. He stood in her path, blocking her way. "Ma'am," he began, his voice barely a whisper. He couldn't meet her eyes, focusing instead on a spot on the pavement. "Ma'am, I need to apologize for my conduct the other day. For how we treated you. There's no excuse." Evelyn stopped and looked at the young soldier. She saw not the arrogant guard from before, but a humbled boy who had been taught a harsh lesson. She gave the smallest of nods. "You were doing your job, Private," she said, her voice devoid of malice. "You saw an expired ID and non-regulation gear. You followed protocol." She paused, letting the lesson land. "But we should have known, you say." "You couldn't have known. That was the point." Danner finally looked up, his eyes filled with a dawning understanding. He simply nodded, speechless, and stepped aside. 6 months later, the phantom attacks on military installations across the country stopped completely. No one knew for sure if Evelyn had found the rogue operative or if her new, intricate security protocols had simply made further attempts impossible. Ramsey never asked. He just knew his base, and many others, were safe. At the Northwell checkpoint, bolted discreetly to the back wall inside the guard booth, away from public view, a small, steel plaque was installed. It read, "In honor of the one who didn't need orders to protect us. Ghost Recon lives on." Sometimes, on her way out, Evelyn would pause by that booth. She'd never looked directly at the plaque, but she knew it was there. It was more recognition than she had ever wanted. A year later, new technicians arriving at Northwell were told a story during their orientation. If you ever hit a wall, their grizzled instructor would say, "A problem that seems impossible, there's a civilian consultant who sometimes comes in on Wednesdays. You'll know her when you see her. Don't bother her. But if she offers you advice, you take it. You ask respectfully, and she might just help you understand systems you didn't even know existed." Evelyn Shaw never reclaimed a rank or a spotlight. She chose to remain a ghost, a guardian in the shadows. She reminded a world of rigid rules and official records that the most critical systems are often protected by those who exist outside of them. The most dangerous assumption is that the person with expired credentials has expired knowledge. The most valuable expertise often belongs to those who no longer seek a position. And the most important protection comes from those who expect nothing in return. True honor isn't in a name on a list, but in the actions that protect it. Comment with respect, and share this story if you believe in the quiet heroes.